Alright, everybody, welcome to, I guess, our second taping or stream of Completion Critiques, which will be kind of like our new name from Achievement Analysis, where our goal is to examine the completion and achievement rates of games to see what we can learn about how well a game succeeded among its fan base. So after the last stream of this, we did some talking, and I think we've settled on a good groove for what we're going to be talking about and how each show is going to go. So for the streams, we're going to try and do 2 games a week, probably about 30 minutes apiece. For those of you watching this recorded, we'll post 1 recorded episode each week. So from what we talked about last time, we're not going to be giving games official grades. Instead, there are 3 things we are going to be examining for each title. Yes. We're going to examine what the churn rate of a game is. Specifically, how much of the people who bought the game completely quit the game before, it could even begin. And the reason why we're going to look at this is that the churn rate is the number of people who bought a game that most likely aren't going to be fans of this game or of the studio. They're the group that you are not going to be able to count on as a potential fan base going forward. From there, the next thing we're going to look at is the clear rate. How many people, or what's the percentage of people who actually finished the game? And of course, this is going to give us a good idea of those who are fans, those who you can expect that they are going to stick around and play your game. Yeah, and that is, of course, you can blame that one on YouTube for that delay. And then from there, we're going to take the 2 and figure out what exactly is the core base of this game, or the number of people who bought the game who you can reasonably rely on are going to be those who will be fans. And the reason why these are important is that this will allow us to kind of determine how much of a game actually succeed. It should only be like 5 seconds. Let me do a quick double check. You're going to see my lovely UI here. Because it should only be, there, a 5-second delay. It's ultra low. I don't think I can't do anything better, unfortunately. I think that is just YouTube being YouTube. But, back to the show here. So for this week, I'm going to try, although I'm not going to promise this for every show, I'm going to try and have the 2 games be related in some way. Whether it's by genre, by complete opposites, sequels, whatever. See what that delay is. And it's about like 10 seconds for me. And for this week, we're going to start with Where the Water Tastes Like Wine. This is a game that is very much story over gameplay. And then for part 2 this week, we're going to look at Grim Dawn, which is a game that is very much gameplay over story. And for this week, the reason why I chose these 2 games is we want to take a look at just how much having a good core gameplay loop really matters. Even if your game isn't focused on gameplay or interaction, if people don't like or they're not enjoying your game, all the story and prestige in the world is not going to matter. And Where the Water Tastes Like Wine certainly has it. As you've been seeing the trailer kind of like scroll by here, it had a lot of talent attached to it, from those who wrote the game to those who did a voice acting for it. It has a unique style to it. But as you look at these screenshots, you're probably noticing something. The art and just overall appearance of these kinds of story vignettes is a far cry from when we actually get to the gameplay. And you see a scene like this. And you're going to see over the next few minutes just how much of that created churn for Where the Water Tastes Like Wine. And I hate to keep bringing this game up, but it's still a game that I feel a lot of people argue that it did better than it did. That, surely it was the audience that didn't like the game, or, people are just being critical of it. And we have seen games that are critical successes and commercial failures. And again, I don't know if this game is a commercial failure, not only the developer will be able to answer that. But it is a game with a very low review score after being out for at least 3 years. And for this game, or for the show, we want to try and keep it to reviewing games that are no less than 2 years old. I think that is the bare minimum. We want, I think, ideally 3 years or more out. Because at that point, we can assume that the majority of the fan base and the majority of the consumer base has bought the game. Yep, to the 800, less than 800 reviews. Metacritic of 74, but we really don't care about that here. And what we're probably going to see if we scroll down and look at all these reviews is that people are going to talk about the story a lot. Now, whether they talk about the gameplay is another story entirely there. And it was priced at 20. I think it was priced higher than that at launch, but I don't remember. But let's get to the nitty-gritty here, and let's look at these achievements. So for those of you who are new watching, we're looking at the Steam Global Achievements for these games. Because this will tell us, at least with some measure of accuracy, maybe, the number of people who bought the game and their relation to completion. So, in a game like this, even though this is story-driven, there is still progress to be had in terms of moving around the map, finding these various people. Excuse me. Oh, excuse me, my voice is dying already. Moving around the map, talking to these various people, and kind of initializing their stories. So right away, I'm sure all of you just notice a... Oh man, voice is really going on me here. I may have to stop for a second and run grab a drink, but we'll see. But you've probably noticed a very big issue right away. And while you're noticing that, I'm going to run to the other room and grab my drink. I will be back in 30 seconds. I went and grabbed 2 drinks just to be on the safe side. When they cut all those trees outside my window, there's I smell gas all coming from my window. It's really messing with my voice. So I wait about 15 minutes after they left to start the stream, and apparently that may not be enough. But am I drinking wine? That's the question. But the big issue, I'm sure you've all caught by now, is that almost within 20 minutes of playing this game, 40% of the fan base, or 40% of the player base, stopped. And I'm going to pull up... I just want to see where I actually got in this game. Because I don't think I got much further in terms of my achievements. Let's see. Yep, I made it to the Hobo Kid part. Let me see. Yes, it tastes just like wine. So, the Hobo Kid, that is about 15 to 20 minutes of play. And Where the Water Tastes Like Wine completely lost 40% of its player base before we even got 30 minutes in. That is horrible. While we're not going to be issuing grades on the show, we're still going to talk about whether or not this game did good or bad. And losing 40% of the people who bought your game within 30 minutes, that'll have to be a Patreon incentive. But losing 40% is not good. And even that is not the official end of the churn rate. Because if you look right here, we go from 60 to 39 to 26. So to be reasonably kind to some extent, we're going to say that the churn rate is going to be, let's see, we lost, what would you say, 80, no, I'm sorry, about 73.1% of that rate. So churn is 73.1. And the churn rate, you want that to be as low as you can. You want a high stabilization rate. Because people, once you get past the churn and you're at where your game stabilizes, these are the people who at least enjoy your game to get past the early pain points or anything that kind of stop them. So, with a churn rate of 73.1%, that means that, again, only about 26.9% of the people who bought Where the Water Tastes Like Wine played it enough to say, I want to keep playing this game. And that is a terrible thing. I may put up there the stabilization rate as well, just to have 4 things. Yeah, maybe I'll do that just to make it a little bit easier for everyone to keep track of. So it's stabilized at 26.9. Also, I think I'm going to run out of room, so I may have to shrink this down just a little bit, but I'll have to adjust that as need be. So it's stabilized at 26.9. If we keep going down from here, you can see that the churn rate has decreased dramatically. 26.9 to 25 to 23, 23. And this is what you want to see. You want to see very low numbers from progression achievement to progression achievement. No, it's stabilized at 26.9. But it keeps going down and down. There we go. And we keep looking. It's still going down. It's still very much going down. And if we count the ending as storyteller, that is at a clear rate of 5.1. So, all the 26.9% of people who stuck with Where the Water Tastes Like Wine enough to play it, only 5.1% of that group actually saw the game through to the end. And yes, that is not a good sign. Now, to kind of extrapolate what the core base of people who play this game was, we're going to divide 5.1, or we're going to divide, 5.1 by 26.9. Because again, we cannot count the 73.1% of the player base who were churned out as anywhere near potential fans or consumers of this game. So if we do that, and I have my lovely calculator right here, 26.9 times it by 100. So that means that 18, we'll round it up for, yeah, let's round it up. We'll round it up to 19% of the people who stayed with the game kind of would be considered the core base. And I think this is a case of the game just did not resonate with people. I actually started playing A Night in the Woods on my own because that's another game that I want to take a look at in a later show and see how well that game did in terms of retaining its audience. But from what I personally played of Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, and again, for me, I fell into churning right here. That I just found the gameplay just not at all interesting or something that I wanted to play in order to get to these stories. We should at some point, as another example, look at one of Failbetter Games' titles, because their games are very much story driven with gameplay second, and I'm curious to see if their churn rates are any better. Yeah, that was another game that kind of blew up among indie circles. So what we can see here is that the gameplay, from what I played of Where the Water, like there were cases where you had like limited resources, like it just felt very ponderous to play. And for a game that's all, or the focus is going to be on the stories and all the unique people and voices that you hear, a lot of people did not want to put up with that. And again, going from 60 to 39 to 26, all within probably the span of, I don't know, 40 to 50 minutes. That is not at anywhere considered good. You want your stabilization rate, you want low churn and high stabilization just to begin with. Because if you can only churn, let's say, 10% of your fan base or 10% of the consumer base, that means that you are starting at 90% of the people who bought your game at least played enough to learn the core gameplay and say to themselves, okay, I want to play this game more. And this is why, when we look at this is not, unfortunately, a success of a game design. Even if this game did pull in a lot of people who bought it, a lot of critics who loved it, losing 73.1% is bad. Well, that we can actually tell to some extent, Pony. If the clear rate, if you have a let's say you have a stabilization rate of 26, and the clear rate is 25 or 26, that means of the people who at least stood or at least stuck with it, did clear the game. So that would mean that we had a core base of 100% at that point, or 95%. And that would indicate that this would be more of it's a niche success. It still would be considered a success at that level. It could do better to be more welcoming and inviting to other people. But at least the people who said, I understood this game, they still beat it. And if we do get to something like La Mulana or Spelunky, we'll be able to see whether or not that holds true or not. No wine here. But again, you can even see that the completion achievements, the ones that are about seeing these stories all the way through to their very end, it starts at 8.6%. So even if these stories are so emotionally resonating and amazing, not even 10% of the people who bought this game or even played this game actually saw them to the end. And that, unfortunately, and here's the other thing, I don't know if these achievements, I'm assuming they count press keys and review keys as well. So a lot of this could even be just the critics who kept throwing praises at where the water tastes like wine. And we may not know exactly how much of the consumers play this game all the way through. Because again, at a clear rate of 5.1%, that is not good. I would say if you're, like I said, if your clear rate is at least 30% or higher, I would say that is acceptable. If it's, less than 20%, something broke down somewhere. And again, if your churn rate is, more than half your player base, yeah, there's a big problem here. Water tastes like churn. What does that taste like? But there really isn't a lot here that we can more or less talk about. So we let some of this footage go. No, we only music. I love it when Steam just automatically plays the music for you. But as we go through this, you can see how some of this gameplay interaction was going to work. And I remember it had something to do with matching these various cards or playing them. And it's very much trying to kind of gamify or abstract how these stories work. But again, you can see such a sharp contrast from the gameplay related screens to the story or narrative driven scenes. Churn tastes like churn, yes. And unfortunately for this game, and what I think developers have to learn the hard way, story doesn't really mean much to the consumer base if they can't enjoy the gameplay. And as we look at other games that are also story-driven or franchise-driven, I'm sure we're going to see lower churn and higher stabilizations. Which part? Churn and chum. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at my chat is a little stretched out because of how my UI is. I'm still the yog. Anyone want some chum? But with that, the lessons again are that story-driven games are a harder sale, I think, for consumers these days. Especially when they come at kind of a higher price for that level of gameplay. Now again, I'm sure a lot went into the productions and the aesthetics, especially getting the writing and voice acting talent. But when you're trying to sell somebody on a game, they expect, again, some enjoyable level of gameplay. I mean, even though something like Gone Home didn't exactly have high-stakes gameplay and moment-to-moment design to it, it wasn't, horrible to move around and explore. And that is something you have to understand, that the first, middle, and end of your experience, you have to look at the core gameplay loop and the moment-to-moment gameplay. If you can't get that working, or if it's bad, most people aren't going to stick around. You're going to have people who will. Again, we have of the 100%, or I'm sorry, of the 26.9% of people who stuck around to kind of figure out where the water tastes like wine, 19% of that group we could assume are fans and will probably buy the next game almost sight unseen. But you want those numbers higher. Even though there's a wolf gambling right now, you want to, hedge your bets and mitigate the risk as much as possible. Because if you can't do that, you're going to have less or fewer and fewer, people try your next game and your next game. And this is where we often see any developer struggle, that Let's say their first game sold 50,000 copies, and then the second game sells 35,000, and then the next game sells 20,000, and they're just making the same thing. And the problem is that the consumers don't want to play your same problems. Maybe. Well, he's voiced by Sting. I'm sure Sting costs a lot to do the voice acting. But you want to see these numbers grow. And one of the things that when we do take a look at kind of the first game into the second game, these rates should improve because you have more people who have already been established playing your game. You don't want them to go down. And as a company, you don't want to see that as well. Because this is where we often see critical successes and commercially ending disasters happen. That everyone who stuck with the game enjoyed it, but that may only be like 15% of everyone who bought your first game. and then you try to make another game and hope to get 100%, and maybe only 8% of those people show up. And you just spend 3 to 5 years and who knows how much money, and you're not getting that back. And again, this is where UI, UX, and playtesting come in. But with that, we are going to reset my lovely little scale. And I'm going to edit this part. But when I do the video, of course. And we're going to switch games to Grim Dawn. So there is a second reason why I chose Grim Dawn this week, and we'll get to that when the time comes. There's that delay happening too. Let me see. The shark has a sound. I can always splice this in. Oh, it's just that. Damn you, 20-second delay. Alright, let's get to our second game of this week's show, and that is Grim Dawn. Grim Dawn is one of those games that I have played this one so many times that, I've tapped the well as much as I can in terms of playing this game. Like, I don't think I can play this game anymore because I've done it so many times. But Grim Dawn is, of course, from Crate Entertainment. And, exactly, Pony. And they were the makers of Titan Quest. And I enjoyed Titan Quest. It was probably, like, one of the more successful ARPGs that didn't have Blizzard Studios attached to it. And the studio, Iron Lore, I believe they actually went out of business due to just, some very big mistakes they made and some big mistakes from their publisher. So the team got together, they formed Crate Entertainment, they did a Kickstarter, I think this was like 2011, 2012, and they wanted to make a spiritual successor, and that turned into Grim Dawn. And of course, Grim Dawn came out right in that period where everyone was, jockeying for Diablo 3's throne after Blizzard, fumbled it there. Of course I do. And Grim Dawn turned out pretty damn well. If we look right here, it has a lifetime review of over 50,000. And I would say, as a first game from a studio like that, even on top of that being a Kickstarter-funded game, no, I don't have a California lawsuit, hopefully, but as a Kickstarter-funded game, to still get over 50,000 additional, reviews on top of that, that is really damn good for them. And now they're working on, I think it's a city builder for their next game. But let us get to the achievements and see just how well a very, I wouldn't say old school, but more older-minded ARPG did with its fan base. So, as you can see, we do have some big churn to talk about. Hitting level 10 is maybe 15 minutes? 25 minutes? Like, if you're playing this casually, I would say like maybe like 15 to 20 minutes. Like, for me, I can hit level 10 in like, 8 to maybe about 10 minutes of myself now these days. Just because I know where to go with it. But they lost a lot of people. And this isn't even when things stabilized. And I can talk about, I have a really good idea as to why this happened. Grim Dawn is very much an ARPG for ARPG fans. The onboarding and kind of UX of this game, I think, were rough. Rough, borderline poor. If you remember, I played this with Mojo and Shark on stream. And they didn't play the game before, and they had some issues with it. Like, for me, I played the hell out Titan Quest and all of its expansions. So I knew a lot of what that formula was going to be when I first played it. And of course, by the time we played it on stream, I've logged in a whole lot of time in Grim Dawn. Let's see, I have 288 hours spent playing Grim Dawn. So I have some mileage in this game. But Grim Dawn is not the same as Diablo 3, and I would, again, because Diablo 3 is not on Steam, we can't look at it. I would love to be able to know what the churn rate of Diablo 3 was. Because I feel it is lower than Grim Dawn. I think, credit where credit is due. Diablo 3 did far better in terms of weaning people into the experience. In Grim Dawn, you're basically told right from the get-go, okay, now pick your game-defining class for the next 100 hours. And then at level 10, they say, okay, now dual spec if you want. And the game hits you with a lot. This is a game where cold damage and freezing damage are two different categories, such as fire and burning. And if you didn't learn this through guides or watching people play it, you are kind of setting yourself up for failure with Grim Dawn. So if we look here, again, so we go to 62%, 58%, then we go to 49.8%. So even though this is a very small drop, we still have a more sizable one right here. And when we're looking at stabilization, we want it to be essentially, when does it become, less than, like, I would say 5 to 4% of the player base per achievement. Like, anything more than, I think, 6 would still be considered a big drop. And so you got to the lab, which would be probably 40 minutes to an hour if you're playing it casually. And I know that the Tinkerer, that's not even the end of Act 1. Excuse me. So, if we want to be kind to Grim Dawn, we can say that it's stabilized at, well, we can say the churn rate is at 50%. So, it's stabilized at 50. Of course, it gets better at 50 hours in all games, too. So, we can tell that this one has less churn and higher stabilization compared to where the water tastes like wine. And I don't think we're going to be seeing 50-50 as much going forward. Now we keep going down. So 48.4% beat Act 1. So Act 1 is, I would say, if you're really good at the game, 30 to 35 minutes. If you're a speedrunner, less than that. Casually, probably at least an hour if you're exploring everything and trying to do it. Well, when we get to later in the game, I'm going to talk about what that means. But I found the game just to be, I got tired of it. Like, I felt the end game, or the late game of Grim Dawn, to be lacking. And we're going to see that as we get further down. So we go 48, still going down, 45, 45. Slay Darius Crownley, that was the Act 2 boss. So going from Act 1 to Act 2, they only lost about 6% of the player base. They won. So we're still good. So we go 42, 40, 37, 36, 33. Still going down. Secure the Burwitch. This is... Hey. Gutworm? Is that the one? I'm trying to remember, like, where some of these progress ones. I know Salazar, that would have been, I think, Act 3 or Act 4. Then we have Slay Karz. And then we're still going down. Slay the Herald of Flame, the Bane. So, in terms of completion, Grim Dawn sits at 25.9%. So again, we'll round that up to 26. And to be fair, this is what we want to see. That it's a gradual drop. It does have achievements. I don't honestly know if I can check them globally from battle.net. And I'm trying to see... And again, if we look at this, like, once it's stabilized at 50%, it's just very gradual. You know, no more than maybe 5 points, if there is a big drop. Most of it's like 1 to 2 points. And that's great. So that's telling us that 50% of the people who bought Grim Dawn, we can count on them being fans in the future. Or mostly being fans. So we have a clear rate of 26. So we take 26 divided by 50. So that means that we have a core base of people who bought Grim Dawn. Of 52% of that actually finished the game. And I would say anything higher than 50 is well done. So, of all the people who actually stuck with the game, we know at least half of them saw through all the way to the end. So, they must be at least fans of the game, unless they wanted to just hate play the game. But there's another reason why I wanted to pick Grim Dawn this week. And that is that it had expansion level DLC. 2 to be exact. If we go back over here... Ashes of Malmuth came first, and then the Forgotten Gods came second. Both adding in a brand new area. And brand new masteries. So, but here's the thing, and it's something that we've talked about before when it comes to post-release support and, you know, new chapters. The clear rates for this DLC in terms of the, you know, grand scope of things is not really the best. So this would be Malmuth, I think, starting from like right here. Death Room, fight continues. So 16, here's the interesting point. 16.7% of the fan base or the stabilization, they're the only ones who actually even tried the Mammoth DLC. Because the Clear the Ethereal Barrier, that is just literally go over here, use this item, DLC starts. So 83.3% of the people who bought Grim Dawn never even began to see what the DLC offered. And we keep going down, trying to see if there is an achievement for beating it. And I think it's this. Well, it does say complete the Ashes of Mammoth. So of the 50% of stabilization, only 12% of that group actually finished the first DLC chapter. So that is definitely not a core base of 52. Well, you see, there's something a little bit more muddied about this. You see, the DLC adds in additional masteries, and those masteries can be applied with brand new characters. So we could hypothesize that people who bought the DLC may have just used those characters to play the base game. I know I did it for a lot. I made a lot of Necromancers, the, what was it? Not Archival. There's another one that was all like trap-based and dual-wield and all that. So it could stand to reason that a lot of people bought the DLC, tested the Necromancer out, maybe they beat the game with it, and then just said, yeah, I'm done. Now, another thing about Mammoth is that I believe that expansion is locked until you beat the base game. No, there is not. At least not from what I could see on this list. I believe these are part of the second DLC right here. But yeah, we're not... Yeah, I don't see any mastery-based achievements. Oh god, 6% beat New Game Plus. Oh god, 5.8% beat the game on Ultimate difficulty. I believe it goes Normal, Elite, Ultimate. And you can see again that as we get further and further down, fewer and fewer people are actually playing this. Huh. Summon 18 pets at the same time. I'm surprised I didn't do that one. Reach Forever. And these are faction-based achievements. They're not class or mastery-based. Wow. I didn't think there were this many achievements. Conquer, Crucible, Destroy, He's Not Expecting You. I've been really wanting to do this one, and I've never been able to get it before reaching level 11. Construct defenses. Complete the game ultimate difficulty in hardcore mode. Yeah, so there are no class or mastery based achievements in Grim Dawn. I'm sure they must have those stats, on their end, but they are not here. So, and this is what we've said before, like when you release post-content or post-release DLC, there's, I think, less and less of people who want to come back and play the game again or play it more once they've seen the end of it. Now, I'm curious if there are stats about that. And then if we go further down, these achievements, I believe, are from the second. Oh, wait, here it is. Perfect. And so, of the 16%, or what do I say? Where was it? Yeah. So, of the 12% of the people who beat Ashes of Mammoth, if we go down here, 8.2% cleared the Forgotten Gods. Yeah, I did beat it on hardcore difficulty, but I did not beat it on Elite or Ultimate. I won't try and lie about that. Now, the thing about Forgotten Gods is I find very interesting. The Forgotten Gods content unlocks after Chapter 1. So once you beat Krieg, right here, the DLC will unlock for you. So you can play that at any time after you beat Act 1. So even with that, fewer people wanted to invest in that expansion or in that specific content. And that, again, I think is an important stat to tell, that even if you have all this new stuff and more story-based, things to do, you're kind of pitching it to a smaller and smaller audience. And of course, don't forget, when it comes to DLC, that DLC costs money. You're going to have to buy the base game for $25. You're going to then have to spend an additional $18 for the first expansion. And then if you want the second expansion, you're going to be spending an additional $16. So the investment keeps going up and up, and you're pitching it to fewer and fewer people. Because if somebody didn't like the base game of Grim Dawn, what makes you think they're going to spend an additional $33 or $34 on more content? Maybe a masochist, right, Shark? So the thing that we can take away from Grim Dawn, at least in terms of its base content, that it did reasonably succeed. Yes, it did lose 50% of its player base. I did hear Neon Continuum is pay to win from a very credible source. But it did have, at least of the 50% who stuck around, a little more than half beat the base game. And beating the base game, that is still... That's still, I think, a good, casually, 10 to 15 hours that they stuck with it. So the game did succeed there. But I think where they can improve a lot, if they do decide to do another ARPG in the future... There we go. Thank you, Tomy. That if they do decide to do another ARPG in the future, they need to work on the opening. I do want to pick up that game. I don't know if I'm going to get a press key for it, but fingers crossed. But the UI UX of Grim Dawn is not the best. They have actually done updates to that. They actually implemented some modder features into, I think it was Forgotten Gods, which was really nice, or even just to the base game. But it's still a lesson in that this was a game that wasn't pitched to newcomers. This was pitched to the people who play Diablo, they play Titan Quest, and said to themselves, I want more of this. I want bigger and better and just more involved. And to them, they got their money's worth. To the 50% who just wanted to try and learn a new ARPG, or maybe they didn't even play Titan Quest, they were just trying to jump into this one, they just said, nope. They found it either too complicated, too dry, and they stopped playing. And again, we can say that a lot of, the presentation of Diablo 3, I think, helped that game with the more, brighter colors, full voice acting, and just the general spectacle and polish that Blizzard put in. Yeah, if your game is 800 hours, you're guaranteed at least, a S++ review score, right? And I'm curious about Titan Quest really fast. Yeah. 17,000. And they stabilized down to 32%, which the Minotaur lore would have been Act 1, I believe. Wait. Yeah, I think the Minotaur lore was Act 1. So, again, the first hour, they lost 68% of the people who played this game. And how many people beat it? 13.4. So that is definitely a worse score than Grim Dawn. And again, they have a lot of. They had, I think, 2 or 3 expansions. And I think most people just said, we played the base game, I think we had enough. Yeah, Titan Quest came out in 2016. Interesting. I thought it came out later, honestly. Wait. Anniversary. Something may be a little skewed here. Because I think they may have done a re-release of Titan Quest for 10-year anniversary restored. Unless that was the one, or the re-release was in 2016. Yeah, I thought the version I played came out in like 2018, 2019. I had no idea that a co-creator of Age of Empires made Titan Quest, though. That's interesting. Makes you wonder how many people from Iron Lore were originally from Ensemble. But I think that will do it for this week's show. We did it in under an hour, too. Oh, let me see. Maybe I can look this up really fast. Titan Quest original release. It's 2016. So then the 10-year anniversary would have been 2016. Is Titan Quest boring? Is one of the questions. There we go. When you search for Neon Continuum, one of the questions will be, is Neon Continuum pay to win? And the answer will be yes. But our lessons from this week's show. One is that gameplay will always trump story and aesthetics. If your moment-to-moment gameplay is lacking, people aren't going to stick around no matter how emotionally driven your story is. But even with that said, a bad UI UX or something that is not meant for newcomers will churn quite a bit. And to be fair with Grim Dawn, there we go. What's the scale on that question, Pony? And again, to be fair to Grim Dawn, so far for this show, or what we've done so far, it has the highest core base of the games that we've played. With of the 50% who stuck with it, at least 52% beat that game, and that was still, again, like a 10 plus hour experience. Now, there are a few, as a bit of a spoiler, there are some games I want to look at for future shows that are still too young. Titles like Yakuza, Like a Dragon, and even stuff like Doom Eternal as well. Because I want to see how games with very unique gameplays or just big changes to their franchises, whether or not they succeed in terms of courting those fans to try them out. Maybe Bloodstained as well. Again, there are a lot of games. If you guys want to pitch more, let me know in the comments. Again, the rules are that it has to be, or the achievements have to be progression based. As a quick tangent, if I go over here to Fight and Rage, one of my favorite beat 'em ups, this is a game that would be horrible for the show for one reason. There are no progression based achievements. It just goes from beginning to finish the game. Like, we have no way to track how well the game retained people chapter to chapter, game by, or level to level. So even though I really love this game and would love to do an analysis on it, this one would not work. Pixels. Is that the one that I'm thinking of? Oh, I was thinking of the other, the beat 'em up that we played. with all the drug use. Does this have clear achievements? Oh yeah, definitely it does. We could certainly look at this one. I'm not going to look at it now because then I'm basically doing a free third episode for our stream. Yeah, the problem with Fight and Rage is that we don't really know where the stabilization occurs because it goes from 100 to 18. And beating the game is probably like an hour, maybe an hour and a half if you're playing it casually. But yeah, of course I do. I charge in watery wine. Also, this water's sat out for like a few hours. It's not the best to drink, which is why I stopped drinking it. But we're going to wrap up things for this week. I think going forward, I'm going to try and do things, or try to do like the live show of this on either Monday or Tuesday of each week. And for those of you watching this recorded, again, I'm only going to be posting one episode a week. So if you want to catch the entire hour's worth and ask questions, be sure to tune in, do the liking, subscribing, as Shark says, do the licking, and smashing the buttons as well. Yes, it does. So I will be back for our regular game stream later tonight. If you're new, check out the Discord, Patreon, do all the as aforementioned liking and such. And come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. Until next time, everybody, take care.